Hi, one sec. Having to drag this out every time there was an odd job to do around the house was starting to become a right pain in the arse. Tighten a hinge, fix a kitchen drawer, chisel a sliver off a door frame so a bolt slides freely. None of those jobs really justified all this. So I set myself a challenge. Could I build a toolkit that would fit inside of this pouch and still solve as many of those everyday jobs as possible? Not every job, just most of the ones that had me dragging that out. And after more than a year refining it, this is where I've got to so far. Now, before we start taking this apart, let's have a look at the platform itself. This is the Viperade VE18. It's made from 500 denier polyester, so it's tough enough for everyday use without being unnecessarily heavy. Around the outside, we've got molly straps, paracord attachment loops, and a sleeve that's designed to take either a phone or a field notebook. I'm using it for neither. Then you've got two EDC organizer pockets, a dedicated multi-tool pocket, and two zipped compartments. Now, we're not going to spend all of our time on the VE18, but it is the platform that the entire system is built around. And while putting that system together, I realized that I kept coming back to the same handful of design principles. Don't worry, to keep it light, I'll crowbar those in as we go along. And speaking of crowbars, let's take this apart. And there was never really any doubt as to what the first item in this pouch was going to be, the Victorinox Handyman. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll probably recognize footage here from a number of different videos. And rather than doing another Handyman review, I thought it would be much more useful showing the implement set doing the jobs it's handled for me over the years. I'll be linking all the videos I'm using, including the full Handyman review, in the description and pinned comments, so don't go anywhere. For this video, the important question is, why is it in this kit? And what is it that makes it the foundation for this entire system? And the answer is actually very simple. The Victorinox Handyman packs an extraordinary number of genuinely useful capabilities into a very small space. That brings us to design principle number one, functional density. The Handyman has what I call a high functional density. That is a lot of implements and use cases per cubic centimetre, inch, or whatever. In other words, how much useful capability can you possibly squeeze into the smallest space? And for an odd job pouch like this, that's exactly where I wanted to start. I've made a few changes over the years. Quick release dongle, black plus scales with a black toothpick, and black laser engraved tweezers. There's a pen and a pin. Nothing dramatic, just small improvements that make it nicer to live with every day. Inside the corkscrew, I keep the Victorinox eyeglass screwdriver and a little tinder protected with some heat shrink tubing. But the Handyman isn't just the foundation of this pouch, it's the basis of my entire screwdriver system. The first thing I wanted to do was build on what the Handyman already does well. This modified square socket adapter turns the cap lifter into my primary 1/4 inch inline bit driver. It's become my go-to screwdriver for the majority of household jobs. Then there's the modified Leatherman rebar adapter. That fits onto the backside Dolphin flathead driver, giving me a T-bar 1/4 inch driver. Add the Leatherman ratchet and suddenly the Handyman starts behaving much more like a proper screwdriver. The 1/4 inch to 4mm and 4mm to 1/4 inch adapters extend that flexibility even further, and they also double as an extension, which means I don't need to carry a separate extension bar. Then of course you've got the bits themselves. Between the 1/4 inch bits and the precision bits, I've got pretty much every screw type I'm likely to come across around the house. Now with all of this, I thought I'd pretty much solved screw driving, and then I tried to take down the curtains in my daughter's bedroom to wash them. Now those fixing screws sit so close to the wall that none of my existing drivers in any permutation could actually get onto them. So this was one of the last additions to the pouch. It's not here because I need another ratchet. It's here because it's the only tool I've got that solves that specific problem and allows us to get Ella's curtains down to wash.
I've had this for so long, I don't remember where I got it, but there are similar right angle mini ratchets on Amazon.com. Mullwork seems to do some good ones at reasonable prices, so I'll leave a link to those in the description and comments. And I know that Sabercut are very popular and they're very good, but I wanted the thinnest profile I could get, and this one comes in at around 7mm, as do the Mullworks. Anyway, so that is the full screwdriver system. Now, when it came to choosing a second multi-tool, I shied away from duplicating as much of the Handyman's capability as possible. Instead, I wanted something that could fill the gaps. And every implement on this multi-tool has been chosen because it fills a gap left by this one, or because a specific implement on here outperforms the one on the Handyman. So earlier I talked about functional density, packing as much useful capability into the smallest space possible. The Roxon Flex takes an entirely different approach. Rather than accepting somebody else's idea of the perfect multi-tool, I can configure it to suit the jobs I need it to do.
Which leads one nicely to design principle number 2, configurational flexibility. It's not about carrying more implements, it's about carrying the right implements.
If you've been following the channel, you'll probably recognize some of the footage that you're seeing here. It's taken from my dedicated Roxon Flex review, which I'll link in both the pinned comment and the description. But this time I'm not going to review the Flex, I want to explain exactly why I chose this particular configuration.
Let's start with the pliers. Now, the Handyman already gives me an excellent pair of precision pliers, which are ideal for smaller, more delicate work. The Flex, on the other hand, gives me a much larger, much stronger plier head. The handles are extremely comfortable, actually reminding me quite a lot of the Victorinox Swiss Tool Spirit. And because the wire cutters are replaceable, I am much happier doing heavier work with these than I am with the Handyman. Probably the single most important implement I've fitted is the T-Shank holder. Now, the Handyman has both a wood saw and a metal file, but every time you use them, you're wearing the platform itself. With the Flex, these become consumables. When the saw becomes blunt, I replace the saw. When the file wears out, I replace the file. The multi-tool itself stays exactly the same. This in itself segues nicely into design principle number 3. It is decidedly preferable to expend readily replaceable inventory than to incur unnecessary degradation of the platform itself. In other words, I'd rather knacker a couple of €1 jigsaw blades than the wood saw on my Handyman. The next choice was the Eagle's Claw. Now, the Handyman already has a superb can opener, so it wasn't about duplicating that. It's just that the Eagle's Claw gives me a completely different pull style way of opening cans as opposed to the push style of the Victorinox. Also, this makes an excellent package opener. And between this and the Handyman's All, I don't feel the need for a dedicated package opener. The large scalpel holder is there for precision work. So this gives me an incredibly sharp replaceable blade whenever I need to perform an in-the-field appendectomy or something like that, which has never actually happened, which is great because I don't know how to do one. Anyway, I get a sharp replaceable blade whenever I need one without permanently wearing the edge off either of the blades on my Handyman. The chisel is another good example. Now, the Handyman already has one, but this one is almost a centimetre wide. making it much better suited for heavier work. And it also incorporates both V-shaped and circular wire cutting notches for different gauges of electrical wire. That adds capabilities that simply aren't there on the Handyman. So with a plier head, chisel, T-Shank saw and file, and the eagle's claw, we have some evolution from similar implements on Handy Mandy. Yeah, she's a lady, keep up. Which brings us crashing into design principle number 4, meaningful overlap. Where an apparent duplication of capability exists, its continued inclusion must be supported by a demonstrably compelling functional justification. In other words, if two tools or implements do basically the same thing, there'd better be a bloody good reason for carrying them both. For undoing larger knots, I've chosen the marlin spike. Now the corkscrew on the Handyman will certainly do the job, but for thicker cordage and heavy rope, this is simply the better tool. Then you've got the ruler and magnetic retriever, which are two genuinely useful capabilities without having to dedicate space to two separate tools. And something here for measuring angles, which I've never had to use and quite possibly never will, but at least it's there if it ever does happen. And finally, the serrated blade. Now, if there's one implement I've wished that Victorinox would put on the Handyman, it's this. It handles rope, webbing, and fibrous materials brilliantly. And it was the last major gap that I wanted this whole system to fill. One final little interaction between the two systems. Now, these same 4mm precision bits don't just repair the things I'm working on. Amongst them is a Torx bit that I use to adjust the deployment tension on the flex itself. See, that's much stiffer now. And if I loosen it again, there you can see. So even the maintenance of the multi-tool is already built into the kit. Now at this point between these two multi-tools, I've got an enormous amount of capability in quite a small amount of space. But there's still one problem left to solve. The next edition is required to solve a problem that even working together, the Flex and the Handyman can't. Sooner or later you come across a big old nut and bolt. One tool turns, the other one has to hold. And that is why this is here. So why the Giriaitus, I think that's how you say it, Giriaitus adjustable wrench. So I looked at a few compact adjustable wrenches before settling on this one. It's extremely slim, very sturdy, and more importantly, it gives me several useful tools without taking up much space. Its primary job is working alongside the Roxon Flex. The Flex gives me the larger pliers, this holds the other side of the fastener. And together they let me tackle jobs that neither tool could do on its own. The other reason I chose it is the pry bar / nail puller. It's substantially stronger than using the cap lifter on the Handyman. So whenever I need to pry something, this is the tool I reach for first. It also incorporates a ruler and a simple caliper. Now it's not a substitute for a proper vernier caliper, but for quick measurements while repairing something around the house, it's more than good enough. You can open bottles with this bit because we don't have enough cap lifters in the EDC world. And it makes a brilliant phone stand. So if I'm following a repair video while I'm working, this keeps the phone exactly where I need it. And to round it off, there's a glass breaker and a pocket clip that I removed so it fits inside of this pouch easier. So yeah, it's an adjustable wrench, caliper, nail puller, and even a phone stand. But it's my main pry tool, which means once again, it's earning its place by doing far more than just one job. There's actually one other little thing normally hiding out on the Giriaitus. This is just a short length of old bicycle inner tube. I can cut pieces off of this to make ranger bands, which are dead handy for holding things together, adding grip,
securing something temporarily, or just bodging a repair until I can do it properly.
And because it lives wrapped around the Giriaitus, or however you say it, it takes up practically no additional space. Basically, free capability. What's not to love about that? The next thing every repair kit needs is a light source, because being able to repair something doesn't help very much if you can't actually see it. This is the Woburn G5.
Now, regular viewers will probably recognise this torch, because it was actually the very first product I was ever asked to review. And as before, I'll leave a link to the main video. Thankfully, it has definitely earned its place in this pouch, and not just because of the adjustable brightness. What I really like about the G5 is that between this rotating clip and the swiveling head and the powerful magnet, it is really easy to set up in a position that illuminates your work area. And when you're working on a fuse box or there's a power cut, then that is really useful to have. So yeah, the G5 earns its place.
One thing I hadn't actually really appreciated until I started refining this pouch was how often I needed to measure things. For example, when marking drilling holes. Now I know what you're thinking, aha, where's his spirit level? Well, that's where the modern world starts creeping in. It's in an app on my phone.
So the first level of measuring capability is actually built into the Handyman itself. These replacement tweezers have centimetre and inch markings laser engraved onto them. It may not look like much, but they're great for checking if your tyres are still roadworthy. And if I need something a little bit larger, the Giriaitus gives me both a ruler and a simple caliper, and I can measure up to 7 centimetres with that. The Flex also contributes. This implement gives me another ruler, but more importantly, a magnetic retriever. So if I drop a screw inside an appliance or something, I've got a fighting chance of getting it back without having to take the whole thing apart. And then finally, a 1 meter tape measure. Well, IKEA or Leroy Merlin's version of them anyway. It's nothing more than one of the paper tape measures you pick up as you walk into the store, rolled up as tightly as I can get it. I keep a stack of these at home because they're free, they weigh next to nothing, and when one wears out, I simply replace it. So from a couple of centimetres all the way up to a metre, I've always got something close at hand. Of course, measurements aren't much use if you can't write them down. So I always carry a small piece of paper, just enough to jot down some measurements, make a list of materials I need, or sketch out an idea or something. And for that, the little pressurized pen hidden in the plus scales is perfectly adequate, if not adequately perfect. With this here, I don't need to include a separate pen. But sometimes a pen just isn't the right tool. If I'm marking timber and drawing a cut line, then the Sharpie is much more useful.
And that leaves just one last item in the pouch. It's probably the least exciting item in the whole kit, but it's surprisingly useful.
Whether I'm reading tiny markings or just trying to get a good look at something, having a little extra magnification can save a lot of frustration.
And I'm actually going to add one last thing, a single zip tie. It weighs next to nothing, takes up practically no space, and it's one of those things that's incredibly useful when something breaks. You can secure something that's come loose, tidy up some cables, or just bodge something long enough to get you by until you can fix it properly. For the amount of space that costs me, I'll take it.
And that, most conveniently, brings us to our final design principle. Number 5. Every item earns its place. The occupation of finite spatial resources can only be justified by a commensurate contribution to the functional capability of the system as a whole.
Basically, space in this pouch isn't free, and if something wants to live in here, it better earn its keep. And for something that weighs practically nothing and takes up practically no room, this definitely does. Now there's a couple of things that you might have expected to find in here that are conspicuous by their absence. There's no lighter, there's no duct tape, and there's no glue. And that's deliberate because the FlameBoy lighter platform I came up with lives in my pocket, the same way that my watch lives on my wrist. I've already got a refillable lighter, a small supply of duct tape and hot glue, as well as all of the Victorinox 58mm scale tools. And again, I'll link the concept and build videos on this in the comment and description. And moving those scale tools onto the FlameBoy has another advantage. It frees me up to carry this around my neck, my ALOX Classic SD. In fact, I've started thinking of these things slightly differently. Now, there are some things I carry because of what I expect to be doing that day. And then there's what I'd call my absolute carry. So my watch, my phone, my FlameBoy, and this ALOX Classic SD. These four are pretty much with me from the moment I wake up until I go to bed. This, on the other hand, is mission specific. It comes with me when I know there's a reasonable chance I'm going to end up doing some DIY, if I'm going over to my mother-in-law's, for example. And interestingly enough, if I'm carrying this, I don't necessarily need to EDC pocket carry my SOG PowerPoint as well. Most of the jobs I'd normally expect that to deal with are already covered, usually better by what's in here. But equally, I wouldn't take this camping. That's a completely different environment with a completely different set of likely problems. Because this isn't designed for camping, it's designed for fixing things in a domestic environment. Different environment, different problems, different kit. And having said all that, I've already found the limits of this one. There's two areas where it falls short. The first is plumbing. Not long ago, the washing machine stopped draining properly, and I ended up at the back of that and underneath the kitchen sink, dismantling all the draining pipework to clear the blockage. And I really missed having something like this. My Knipex Cobra pliers. Now, the Flex gives me a proper pair of pliers, but they're not water pump pliers, and for that particular job, these would have been far better. And the second is anything that requires a hammer. Now, strangely enough, I already own two short-handled hammer multi-tools, and I really like using a short-handled hammer. The problem is, neither of these is actually a particularly good hammer. On this one, the handle splits apart to become a pair of pliers, which is clever, but it means there's a lot of play in the handle, and it's wobbly as hell when you're hitting a nail. And this one manages to put the pliers up here in the hammerhead. Again, clever, but the two-part handle is held together down here by a spring, which can end up pinching your hand when you're hitting a nail with it. And that is the problem with both of them. In trying to make the hammer do more things, they've actually made it less good at being a hammer. And I don't need another pair of pliers. I don't need another knife or saw or bottle opener or screwdriver or anything. I just need a small hammer that's actually good at hitting things. And I know you can get hammering surfaces on some multi-tools like this Gerber armbar drive, but that just feels wrong to me. I'd rather go in the garden and pick up a stone than risk damaging the tool. But anyway, neither of these earns a place in the next version of this. I'll keep an eye out for something more interesting, but frankly, I might just take a normal hammer and shorten the handle. And I suppose there's a lesson about functional density there as well. More functions in the same amount of space isn't necessarily better if you compromise the function you actually need. So I'd really like the next iteration to include some sort of short-handled hammer, if there's no suitable hammer-based multi-tool. Because design principles are all well and good, but sometimes when you're doing odd jobs around the house, you just need to whack stuff. Now the VE18 is a very capable pouch, robust, and they come in a variety of lovely colours. Of course, for the future of my kit, there's a bit of a quandary. Now this isn't going to hold this. Something like this and everything that's already in here. So the next iteration is going to need a bigger pouch. So in a couple of areas, for my specific use case, this pouch has fallen. And why do we fall, sir? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up and build the next one. So Viperade, or frankly any other pouch manufacturer who's watching, if you've got something that'll take all of this, plus a Cobra XS, and a functionally uncompromised short-handled whack bonk, I'm listening. But that's for another day. For now, this is where I've got to. And what's been interesting for me putting this video together is realizing just how consistently those 5 design principles have shaped it. Functional density, configurational flexibility, protect the platform, meaningful overlap, and every item earns its place. They're not rules as such. They're just a useful set of guidelines to help decide what deserves a place in this or any other system. And judging by how often I keep coming back to them, I suspect you'll be hearing about them again. And speaking of things you'll be seeing again, this is next, the Leatherman Wave Plus. I've referred to it and compared things to it, but I've never actually given it a video of its own, so that's what's next on the list. As always, I'll put links to everything I've talked about today in the pinned comment and in the description, including the other videos I've borrowed footage from. Some of those are Amazon affiliate links, so if you do decide to buy something using one of my links, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but I might get a small commission. And that helps support the channel and lets me keep making videos like this. If you've enjoyed this one, please give it a like, maybe share it with someone who you think could like it as well, and subscribe if you want to see some more content. And finally, as always, thank you very much for the time that you've taken watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you again on the Clown's Pocket. All the best. Bye-bye.